Callum Marsh had not opened the letter. It sat on the kitchen table of the Marsh Ranch for 11 days, sealed with wax and addressed in Thomas Aldridge's hand. C. Marsh, personal. Callum had walked past it each morning on his way to the barn and each evening on his way back, and he had not touched it. He told himself he would open it when he was ready. But 11 days of fence work and cattle checks and meals eaten alone had begun teaching him something he did not want to learn, that ready was not a place a man arrived at when his oldest friend died with a falling out still. Between them, Thomas had been gone for 3 weeks before the news even reached the Marsh spread. A neighbor of Thomas's had sent a short letter by post rider. Thomas Aldridge passed on the 14th. He went easy. He asked us to send word to you. That was all. No cause of death. No mention of his property. No explanation of the sealed second letter that came bundled alongside the first. Just that Thomas was gone, that he had asked for Callum to be told, and that somewhere in his final days, he had found enough of something to write a letter and leave it behind. Callum poured his coffee, set his hat on, and went out to work. He was mending the south fence line when he looked up and saw the woman coming down the road. She was on foot, which was the first unusual thing. But what stopped him entirely was her size. She stood well over 6 feet, and her build was the kind that comes not from ease but from years of labor that would have worn most men through. Her shoulders were wide and heavily muscled beneath a plain gray dress gone pale from washing. Her arms were bare to the elbow and thick with muscle. Her hair was long and blonde, loosely braided and gray with road dust. Her face was strong, with high cheekbones and gray eyes that met his without flinching. She was carrying a saddlebag over one shoulder and a sealed envelope in her right hand. "I am looking for Callum Marsh," she said. Her voice was steady, unhurried, the voice of someone accustomed to being looked at and accustomed to waiting for people to finish. "Looking. You found him." She crossed the remaining ground between them and held out the envelope. The handwriting on it was Thomas's. "Thomas asked me to put this in your hands directly," she said. "I am sorry it took me as long as it did. The road from his place is not a short one." Callum took the envelope and looked at it and then looked at her. "You knew Thomas?" "I worked his land the last 2 years. I was with him when he died." He stood with that for a moment. A stranger had been at Thomas's side. He had not. He folded the envelope into his vest pocket without opening it. "How far did you travel?" "For days." He glanced at the road behind her. "No horse. No wagon. On foot. My horse gave out on the 2nd day. I left her with a family near Grayson Creek. Could not hire another." She said it simply, without asking for sympathy, the way a person reports a fact about weather. "For days on foot through June heat to put a dead man's letter into the right hands. If you are just joining this story today, friend, pull up a chair and stay a while. We would love to know where you are listening from." He said, "Come have some water." She hesitated in the particular way of someone who is not accustomed to being offered things without price attached. "It is a long walk back to anywhere," he said. She came. He did not open the letter that evening either. He put it on the table next to the first one and watched Rowena Hale eat the plate of beans and salt. Pork he set in front of her without ceremony. She ate neatly and without embarrassment, and when she was finished she offered to wash the dishes, and he told her she did not have to, and she washed them anyway, moving around his small kitchen carefully, a woman who had learned to navigate spaces built for smaller people. He asked her name. She told him. He turned it over quietly. "Thomas never mentioned you in his letters," he said. She set the last dish on the shelf and dried her hands on a cloth. "He mentioned you," she said, "often." She asked about the nearest town after that, and he told her it was 8 miles out. She accepted this the way she seemed to accept most things, without complaint and without waiting for someone else to solve it. He offered her the barn loft and she took it, and he came back inside alone and sat down at the table with both letters in front of him, and for a long time he did not move. Thomas had sent this woman to him with deliberate instructions. Put it in his hands personally, not in the post, not with a neighbor, in his hands. Whatever was written on those pages, Thomas had wanted to be sure it arrived, and Callum had now held it in his hands twice and put it down both times. He reached for it in the lamplight. His fingers touched the wax seal. Then he pulled his hand back and sat there until the lamp burned low. Morning came gray and still. Callum woke before light as he always did, pulled on his boots and went to the barn. He stopped in the doorway. Rowena Hale was already at work. She had mucked 2 of the 3 stalls, forked fresh hay from the loft, and was working now on the 3rd with steady, unhurried strokes of the pitchfork. She had her sleeves rolled and her braid pinned back, and she moved through the half-dark without a lantern, working through the familiar tasks of barn labor as naturally as breathing. She heard him and stopped. I hope that was all right. I was awake before dawn and I could not see a good reason to lie there. He looked at the clean stalls. You did not have to do that. I know. She set the pitchfork against the wall and brushed her palms together. What needs doing today? He was about to tell her that nothing needed doing, that she had more than paid for her lodging with the 4-day walk, and that he would hitch the wagon and take her into Coldwater if she needed to get somewhere. He had the words ready, but before he could arrange them, he noticed something he had missed in the dark. His bay gelding, Sutter, had a wrap on his left foreleg that had not been there yesterday. He had some swelling above the fetlock, Rowena said. I found clean rags in the supply box. I hope I did not overstep. Callum stepped into the stall and ran his hand down Sutter's leg. The wrap was firm and even not too tight, seated the way a person wraps a horse when they genuinely know what they are doing. He had noticed Sutter favoring that leg the day before and had meant to tend to it this morning. You wrap horses often? He said. Among other things. She said it without pride. Just information. He came out of the stall and stood a moment with his hand on the rail. He was not accustomed to coming to his own barn and finding work already finished. He could not say with certainty whether what he felt was gratitude or something closer to displacement. Breakfast, he said finally. She had made coffee. He did not know when, but by the time he came in there was a pot on the stove and 2 cups on the table and cornbread working in the pan, which she must have located by going quietly through his provisions without being asked. He stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at the table set for 2 and could not recall the time 2 cups had sat there together. He did not say anything about it. He sat down. Over breakfast he asked her carefully what her plans were, where she was headed next. She wrapped both hands around her cup. Outside the window, the light was coming up over the east pasture in long flat bars. I had not thought much past delivering the letter, she said. Is there somewhere waiting for you? No. He asked it plainly and she answered the same way, and neither of them made more of it than it was. But he heard it. No place waiting. No one waiting. A woman who had walked 4 days for a dead man's errand and had nothing to return to at the end of. There is work here if you need it, he said. She looked at him steadily. I am not asking for charity. I am not offering any. I have been running this ranch shorthanded for 2 seasons. There is a wage, modest but honest. She was quiet a moment. He could see her weighing it the way a careful person weighs something they want but are not entirely sure they have the right to take. Why? She said. You do not know me. Thomas did. He said it and then looked out the window because it was more than he had planned to say. She let it settle before she spoke again. He talked about you the whole last year. The good years and the years that went sideways. Both. She paused. He said he had written you something important. He made me promise to put it in your hands personally because he was afraid that if he sent it through the post you might set it aside. Callum looked at his coffee. He said you were likely to do exactly that, she added, and there was nothing unkind in it. She was simply telling him what Thomas had said. He also said, she continued, and then she stopped herself. She shook her head once. He said there were things in that letter he had waited too long to say. He wanted you to read them while they could still do some good. The kitchen held that for a moment. Callum set his cup down and stood up and said there was a fence section down in the north pasture, and asked if she knew how to handle a post driver. She said she did. He took a pair of worn work gloves from the hook by the door and held them, and she took them. He still had not told her she had the job. But he had handed her the gloves. The north fence had been down long enough that 3 steers had found the gap and wandered into the neighboring pasture, which belonged to a man named Orrin Peck, who kept a careful count of everything that crossed his land. Callum discovered this within the first hour of work, meaning the morning turned from a fence repair into a fence repair and a cattle retrieval, neither of which was a small job for one man. Rowena did not wait to be told what to do. She handed him the post driver when he needed it and took it back when he was done, and when the fence was temporarily braced, she went after the strays without being asked, moving through the field with the steadiness of someone who had spent real time around cattle. The steers were stubborn, but she was patient, and within an hour all 3 were back on the right side of the wire. Callum watched her work the last one through the gap. The animal was a 5-year-old red steer that had given him trouble since its first winter and was suspicious of strangers in the particular way of livestock that had been poorly handled somewhere. Before it came to him, it went where she directed it with only a little argument. "He likes you," Callum said. "He likes that I am not in a hurry," she said. Animals can tell. They worked until past midday. By the time the last post was set and the wire strung tight, the sun was high and the air had gone close and warm. Callum went to the wagon for the canteen and the wrapped cornbread left from breakfast. He sat down on the grass in the thin shade of a fence post and held out the food. She hesitated. Just a moment. The same small pause he had seen the first afternoon when he offered her water. Then she sat down and took the bread. He had noticed that pause twice now. He was beginning to understand what it meant. They ate without talking much. The east pasture spread out green and gold ahead of them, the cattle moving slowly through the middle of it, and somewhere in the distance a meadowlark made its bent, unhurried sound. It was the kind of afternoon that a man running a ranch alone did not often get to sit inside of. Thomas had afternoons like this, Rowena said, looking out over the grass. Toward the end, when he could not work anymore, he would sit outside his door and just watch the land. He said it was the best part of owning a piece of ground, that you could look at it. Callum turned the canteen in his hands. He always thought owning land was something close to a religion. A small smile crossed her face. He said nearly those same words once. They were quiet a moment longer, and then Callum said, "The job is yours. If you want it, room, board, and $1.50 a week." She looked at him. "That is a fair wage. It is what I can manage." "Then yes," she said. "Thank you." Neither of them said anything more about it. The arrangement seemed to require no more ceremony than that. They drove the wagon back in mid-afternoon, and Callum unloaded the tools while Rowena checked on Sutter and changed the wrap on his foreleg. He came to the barn door and was about to say something when she spoke first, her back to him. "Still working. Thomas wrote to you," she said. "During the years you were not speaking. He wrote letters. He just did not send them." The statement reached him quietly and settled the way cold water settles, all the way down. "How do you know that?" he said. "He burned them one evening last winter, a whole stack of them out behind the house. I asked him why he was burning papers and he told me." She finished tying off the wrap and stood and smoothed her dress. "He said he did not know if you wanted to hear from him anymore. He said by the time he understood that the years were running short, there was not enough of them left to do what he should have done earlier." Callum stood in the barn doorway without speaking. "The letter on your table," she said carefully, "is not the first thing he tried to say to you. It is just the only one that survived." He turned that over slowly. Thomas had written letters and held them and destroyed them rather than send them. Had spent years reaching for the same distance Callum had also refused to cross, and neither of them had moved, and now one of them was gone. He went inside without another word and she did not follow him, which was exactly right. The 2 letters were still on the kitchen table. He sat down across from them in the early evening light. He picked up the sealed one, held it, set it down, but this time he left his hand resting on top of it, and he did not take it away for a long while. A week passed. Rowena settled into the rhythm of the marsh spread with the ease of someone who had worked too many. different places to be precious about any particular arrangement. She split wood and mended harness and helped Callum move the cattle to the east water before the creek feeding the west tank ran low. She ate at his table and slept in the barn loft and said good morning and good night and very little in between unless she had something worth saying, which suited him. On the 8th day, Callum hitched the wagon for Coldwater. He had supplies to collect and bank business he had been putting, and Rowena needed work clothes that fit her, a practical matter she had not raised but which he had noticed plainly enough. Her gray dress had not been made for the kind of work they were doing, and she had been managing it without complaint the way she managed most things. She sat beside him on the wagon bench on the way in, watching the land open out around them with the quiet attention she brought to most things. Coldwater was not a large town. A main street, a general store, a bank, a livery, a boarding house, a church built from the same pale lumber as everything else. It had a newspaper that ran once a week and knew everyone's business before the ink was dry. They drew looks the moment the wagon turned onto the main street. Not all of them were unkind, but they were thorough. A woman with a market basket slowed on the boardwalk. Two men outside the hardware stopped their conversation entirely. It was the kind of attention Rowena had received in every town she had passed through, and she bore it with the same composed stillness she brought to everything else, looking straight ahead, giving no one the satisfaction of seeing it settle on her. Orrin Peck was standing outside the general store when they pulled up. He was a broad, red-faced man in his late 50s, the kind of rancher who had done well enough to mistake doing well for being right. He looked at Callum and then at Rowena with the expression of a man who has decided something is amusing before he has thought about it. "That your new hired man, Marsh?" he said. Callum stepped down from the wagon. He did not raise his voice. "That is Rowena Hale," he said, "who has kept my cattle where they belong and my fence in better shape than it has been in 2 seasons. You might also remember she is the reason your south pasture still has all the grass you left in it." Peck made a sound that was not quite a laugh and went inside. Callum did not watch him go. He offered his hand to help Rowena down from the wagon, which he had not done before in front of anyone, and she took it without comment, and neither of them remarked on it further. Inside the store, the proprietor, a thin man named Garfield who had known Callum for 15 years, found what he could in the way of sturdy working clothes in Rowena's dimensions, which required some searching and a good deal of honest measuring. But he did it with professional good humor and charged a fair price for the trouble. While he was wrapping the parcels, he mentioned, without particular ceremony, that Thomas Aldridge had come through Coldwater about a year past. "Asked about you," Garfield said, folding brown paper carefully. "Asked whether you were keeping all right, whether the ranch was holding." He tied the string with 2 neat loops. "He did not ask me to pass anything along. I think he was just asking." Callum looked at the counter for a moment. "I appreciate you telling me on the ride home." The light had gone soft and golden over the plains. Rowena sat beside him with the parcels in her lap, and for a long while neither spoke. She said, "You did not have to say what you said to Peck." "It was true," he said. "I said what was true." She was quiet for another stretch of road. "Most people do not bother." He kept his eyes on the horses. "Most people are not running the same ranch those steers walked off of." She made a sound that was very nearly a laugh, the first time he had heard anything like it from her. It arrived there on that wagon bench and stayed for the rest of the way home, quiet and warm as a coal in a covered pail. When they turned up the ranch road, she said, "Thomas told me the falling out was not over anything either of you would be proud of." He looked at her. "He did not tell me what it was," she said. "Only that." Callum drove the rest of the way without speaking. He unhitched the horses and rubbed them down and came inside and sat at the table, letter between his hands for a long time that evening. Long enough that the lamp burned low twice and he had to trim the wick. He did not open it, but for the first time he thought he might know that he needed to. 3 weeks into Rowena's employment on the Marsh spread, a rider came from the Coldwater Bank. He arrived on a Tuesday morning while Callum was checking the South Water, and he left a sealed envelope with Rowena, who was repairing the paddock gate when he rode up. She took the envelope, said she would see that Mr. Marsh received it, and the rider touched his hat and left. She put it on the kitchen table beside Thomas's 2 letters and said nothing about it when Callum came in for the midday meal. He saw it immediately and went still for half a second, then sat down and ate. She watched him the way she watched most things, quietly and without pushing, and he folded the bank letter into his vest pocket after the meal and went back out without explaining it. She did not ask, but she noticed. That evening she found him in the barn, working oil into Sutter's saddle with slow, deliberate strokes. The horse was well heeled and back in regular use, and there was no practical reason to be tending that saddle so late except that a man sometimes needs something to do with his hands when his mind is working against him. She sat down on the stool near the tack wall and waited. After a while he said, without looking up, "The bank is calling in the note on this property. They want full payment by the 15th of October or they move to auction." She said nothing immediately. "I took a loan against the land 4 years back, after we lost half the herd to a winter storm. I have been keeping up the interest, but I have not touched the principal. They are done waiting." He set the cloth down. "I have about a third of what they want." "How much is the gap?" He told her. It was not an impossible number, but it was not a small one. "Can you make it up by October?" She said. "Not honestly. Not without selling cattle I cannot afford to lose, or selling the east pasture, which is the best grazing ground I have." She was quiet for a moment. "Peck would buy the east pasture. Peck would buy the whole ranch if I let him. He has been after this land for 7 years. He said it without bitterness, just as plain fact. "There is also a man from a Denver land company who sent a letter last spring. He made a fair offer." She looked at him steadily. "Are you thinking about taking it?" He did not answer right away. The horses shifted in their stalls and the barn settled around them and the lamp on the post threw warm light across the stall doors. The silence between them was not uncomfortable so much as it was honest, the kind of quiet that only holds when 2 people have stopped performing for each other. "I do not know," he said finally, and it was plain that admitting he did not know was costing him something considerable. She folded her hands in her lap. "Thomas said you built this place yourself, that you came out here with a horse and $200 and nothing behind you." Thomas talked a great deal. He admired it, she said. He called it the most purely stubborn thing he had ever seen a man do. Something in the way she said it, quietly and with the warmth of a memory being shared rather than kept, made him look up at her. She was watching him with an expression that was not quite pity and not quite encouragement and was something he did not have a ready word for. He looked away first. "If the ranch sells," she said carefully, "I will find something else. You do not need to account for me in your thinking. I know that. I am saying it plainly so you believe it." "I heard you," he said. The lamp guttered and steadied. She stood to go and then stopped, her hand resting on the post at the stall door. She held that position for a moment, and he thought she was about to say something and had thought better of it, and then she turned back. "I have some money set aside," she said. "Not much. $40. It is yours if it helps." He looked at her fully. "I am not offering it as charity," she said, before he could speak. "I am offering it as someone who would like to keep her position a while longer." He did not say yes and he did not say no. He said, "Get some sleep, Rowena." She went. He sat in the barn for a long time after, one hand resting on the worn leather, thinking about $40 offered by a woman who had walked 4 days on foot to put a dead man's letter in his hands and had nothing waiting for her if she left. Thinking about what that kind of offering cost a person to make. Thinking about what it would mean, what it would truly mean, if he accepted. He was not sure he deserved it. He was not at all sure he had the right to refuse it either. He opened it before sunrise. He had not planned to. He had gone to bed the same as every other night, with the letter on the table where he could not avoid seeing it. And he had woken in the gray hour before first light with the certainty that whatever Thomas had written was already changing him without his having read it, and that was not a fair way to go about things. He lit the lamp. He picked up the envelope. He broke the seal. Thomas's handwriting was unsteady in places. The hand of a man who had written carefully and slowly, with effort, covered 3 pages. Callum read it through once and then sat for a long time before he read it again. Thomas began by saying he was sorry it had taken him this long to put the words on paper, and that he had been a fool about it for reasons that did not hold up under honest examination. He said the falling out, which he named plainly and without soft, had started over money but had never truly been about money at all. He said Callum had refused his offer 7 years ago and done it angrily and without, and that it had stung, and that Thomas had let the sting settle into distance rather than reaching across it. He said he had been wrong to do that. He said a man who waits for another to apologize first is simply a man who has chosen his pride over his friend, and that he had made that choice for 7 years running and was ashamed of it. He wrote, "You were always too proud to accept help without feeling it meant something was broken in you. I knew that when I offered, and I offered anyway because I thought friendship meant I could. I was not wrong to offer. You were not wrong to need it. We were both wrong to let what came after become the whole of it." He said he had started many letters over the years and thrown them in the fire. He said he had not thrown this one because he could feel the time running short, and because silence, at the end, felt like a greater sin than swallowed pride. Then he wrote about Rowena. He wrote about her the way a man writes about something he has thought about carefully and wants to get right. He said she had come to his land as a woman who had learned to make herself useful because useful was the only thing the world had ever reliably rewarded her for being. He said it had taken him a long time to understand the difference between what she offered and what she needed, and that by the time he understood it fully he was too sick to do much about it. He wrote, "I told her to bring this to you personally, not because I planned anything or expected anything from either of you, but because I have known you for 30 years and I know what loneliness looks like on a person who has decided to carry it quietly. I see it on her the same way I always saw it on you. I would like the 2 of you to have the chance to be surprised by each other. That is all I am asking. Just the chance." He signed it with his full name, Thomas Edmund Aldridge, and beneath his name he had added one more line in handwriting that was smaller and more careful than the rest, as though he had gone back to write it after he thought he was finished. "I was glad to know you. I should have said so sooner." Callum sat at the table until the lamp was unnecessary and morning came fully into the kitchen window. Then he folded the letter, put it in his shirt pocket, and went to find Rowena. She was at the paddock with a bucket of oats, and she looked at him when he crossed the yard and understood immediately from his face that he had. "Read it," he said. "We had an argument 7 years ago over money I would not let him lend me. I said things I should not have said." He pulled back. Neither of us moved after that. He paused. "That is all it was." She looked at him quietly. "I know," she said. "He told me it was something like that." "He forgave it," Callum said. He said so plainly. She nodded and did not try to make it smaller or larger than it was. He reached into his vest and brought out her $40 and held it out. "I cannot take this as a wage advance," he said. "I will not be able to repay it on the terms an employee deserves." He stopped. "But if you are willing to put it toward the bank note as a stake in this property, I will give you a written share in the ranch against whatever we recover by autumn. A real share, documented." She stared at him. "It is the fairest arrangement I can make," he said. She took the money back slowly and held it in both hands and looked at it a long moment. He could not tell from her face whether she was moved, and he suspected it might have been both at once, because that was very close to what he felt himself. She said she would think on it. Then she turned back to the horses, as though that were a thing a person could simply think on. 3 days after Callum read the letter, Rowena told him she had made her decision about the ranch stake. She found him at the south water tank and said it without preamble. She would put the $40 in. She had written out the terms as she understood them on a piece of paper, and she handed it to him and he read it and said the terms were right and that he would have a proper document drawn up in cold water. "Thank you," he said, and meant it in a way that covered more ground than the money. She nodded and went back to the paddock, and he went back to the feed line, and neither of them said anything more about it that day. But things between them had shifted in a way that was harder to name than any specific change. They worked side by side and ate together, and the evenings had grown quieter and warmer at once. The kind of quiet that is not empty but full of things neither person has decided how to say yet. On the 5th day after the letter, Orrin Peck rode up the ranch road in his good wagon with a man Callum did not recognize seated beside him. The stranger was from Denver. He had a leather document case and a pleasant manner and a written offer that Peck had brought him to deliver in person, betting that a paper in a man's hands felt different from a letter in the post. He was not wrong about that. Callum read the offer at the kitchen table while Peck and the Denver man waited on the porch. The number was fair. More than fair. It would clear the bank note and leave enough to start again somewhere smaller. Somewhere without 7 years of accumulated debt and a winter that had taken half his herd. He folded the paper and told Peck he would consider it. Peck said the offer would not wait long. He said it pleasantly enough but clearly. After they left, Rowena came in from the barn and saw the document on the table. He told her what it was. She picked it up and read it and set it down. "It is a fair price," she said. "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. "You should take it." He looked at her. "Callum." She said his name the way she said most things, directly and without decoration. "The bank note is due in 6 weeks. Your $40 and mine together do not close the gap. You would still need to sell the east pasture to Peck separately, which weakens what remains of the spread regardless. This offer clears everything clean. You could start somewhere without the weight of it." "That is true," he said. "Then you should take it." He studied her face. She was not wrong about any of the numbers. She had done the arithmetic the same way he had and arrived at the same honest conclusion. But there was something underneath the practical argument, something he had come to recognize in her. The particular quality of a person removing herself from a calculation so that someone else can decide freely. "You are giving me permission to let the ranch go," he said, "so I will not feel I am leaving you without a place." She did not deny it. "I will find work. I always have." "That is not an answer to what I said." She turned toward the window. The afternoon light came in long across the kitchen floor, the same floor where Thomas's 2 letters had sat untouched for nearly a month, where 2 coffee cups had first appeared on the table together. "I do not want to be the reason a man makes a poor decision," she said. "I have spent my whole life not being the reason for anything. I am not practiced at it going the other way." He stood up from the table. He took the Denver man's offer and folded it once and set it on the shelf beside not in his pocket, not in the fire. Aside. "The ranch is not the only reason I am not signing that paper," he said. The kitchen was very still. She looked at him with the full steadiness of those gray eyes, and for once he did not look away first. Whatever she found in his face kept her where she was for a long moment, and he could see the thing moving in her, the wanting and the fear of the wanting, both present at once. Then she said she needed to check on Sutter, and she went. He let her go. He stood at the window and watched her cross the yard in the long afternoon, and he thought about the last line Thomas had written in careful, diminishing handwriting at the bottom of a 3-page letter it had taken a man 30 years to finish. "I was glad to know you. I should have said so sooner." He was beginning to understand, with some urgency, what it felt like to be the man running out of time to say the necessary thing. Callum left for Coldwater before dawn. He did not wake Rowena, though he knew she was already awake, listening to the wagon pull out. He drove the 8 miles with the Denver man's offer folded in his vest pocket. But when he reached the town, he did not go to the hotel to find him. He went to the bank, and he stood on the boardwalk in the morning chill until the doors opened. When he sat down across from the manager, he placed the Denver offer on the desk face down. He did not sign it. Instead, he sold the bank the far northern timber acreage, a difficult, rocky parcel he rarely used, and committed his remaining herd against a newly drafted note. It was not a perfect solution. It would mean tight winters and careful margins for the next 5 years. but the core of the marsh spread, the east pasture, the barn, and the house he had built with his own hands would remain his. Before he left town, he paid a visit to the county clerk. He arrived back at the ranch in the late afternoon. The yard was quiet. He found Rowena in the barn, turning out Sutter's stall. She stopped when his shadow crossed the doorway. She leaned the pitchfork against the wall, her face composed, her broad shoulders braced for whatever news he had brought back. "The Denver man is gone," Callum said. She wiped her hands on a cloth. "You did not sign." "I sold the northern timber ridge to the bank to clear the immediate note. We keep the east pasture. The house stays." She let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for a week. The tension in her massive frame eased slightly. "That is good, Callum. I am glad." He stepped fully into the barn. He reached into his coat and withdrew a heavy document, folded and sealed with the county clerk's stamp. He held it out to her. She did not take it immediately. "What is that?" "It is the deed of partnership," he said. "Your $40 bought your stake just as we agreed." She took the paper slowly, her thick, work-scarred fingers unfolding the heavy stock. She read the words. Then she read them again, her eyes tracking back to the top of the page. "Callum, this is a half share of the entire property. I know what it is. $40 does not buy half a cattle ranch." "No," he said quietly, "it does not." He closed the distance between them. He reached out and gently took the cloth from her hands, tossing it over the. He did not step back. For the first time, he let himself stand close enough to see the sudden vulnerability in her steady grip, the defensive instinct of a woman who had spent a lifetime expecting to be sent away once the hard labor was done. "Thomas said I was too proud to let people help me," Callum said, his voice dropping to the quiet register of absolute truth. "He was right. I thought taking help meant I was failing. But I was failing because I was trying to carry everything alone." Rowena swallowed hard. "You do not owe me half of everything just because I stayed when you needed a hand. I am not giving it to you because I owe you," he said. He reached out and took her hand. It was as large as his own, rough with calluses, strong enough to break a horse, and it trembled slightly in his grip. "I am giving it to you because I do not want you to be my hired hand anymore. And I do not want you to stay just because you are useful. I want you to stay because this is your home." She stared at him, the protective walls she had built over 34 years of lonely labor finally cracking. "I have never had a place that was mine just because someone wanted me in it. You have one now," he said. He looked at her, at the strength of her face and the quiet dignity, and he spoke the words Thomas had left him. "I am glad to know you, Rowena. I should have said so sooner." The tears that rose in her eyes did not fall, but they softened her entire face. She did not shrink away. She stepped forward, letting her powerful frame lean into his, and Callum held her, his arms wrapping around her broad back, anchoring her to the ground they now owned together. Autumn arrived on the plains not with a sudden freeze, but with a slow, golden cooling of the light. The long grass in the east pasture turned the color of old copper, and the mornings began to require the heavy coats they had brought out from storage. They worked the ranch together, no longer as owner and hand, but as partners who knew the exact measure of the other's endurance. There was a deep, sustaining rhythm to their days. They rode the fence lines side by side. When a post needed driving, they took turns with the heavy iron driver, moving with a synchronized grace that made the grueling labor look effortless. Callum no longer worried about what Orrin Peck or the town of Coldwater thought when they rode the wagon in for supplies. The people who stared at Rowena's towering, muscular frame eventually learned to look away when Callum caught their eye, though Rowena herself no longer seemed to notice the stares at all. She belonged somewhere, and the certainty of it had settled deep into her bones. In the evenings, the kitchen was warm and smelled of wood smoke and coffee. There were always 2 cups on the table now. Thomas's letters had been carefully folded and placed in the iron box where they kept the ranch deed, resting safely alongside the paper that carried both their names. Sometimes, long after the lamp was turned low, Callum would sit by the stove and watch Rowena mend a harness or read the newspaper. he would think about how close he had come to missing this life entirely out of pride. And when she looked up and caught him watching, the soft, private smile she gave him was all the answer either of them would ever need. This story is a work of fiction created for entertainment and reflective storytelling. All characters, names, dialogue, events, towns, ranches, and circumstances are fictional or dramatized. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to actual events or places is coincidental. Historical details are used to create a frontier atmosphere and may be simplified or adapted for narrative purposes. Nothing in this story should be understood as historical documentation or as legal, medical, financial, or other professional advice. The story is intended for a general audience and explores universal themes such as dignity, compassion, resilience, forgiveness, belonging, family, and second chances.